This gives you a sense of just how many things there are in the pipeline for not just climate solutions, but reducing emissions from the things that we have become so addicted to. Our lifestyles are very energy intensive, right? When we say we, I mean people like me who have lived in the US or living a good life in India. So continuing with the good news then, tropical primary forest loss for 2002 to 2020. This is for all of the tropics, and of course you have to also look at temperate, boreal, tundra, etc. Primary forest loss is measured here in terms of hectares. So there was a big jump in 2016 and 17, and then it has begun to drop again. And one could take this as somewhat of a good news, because tropical forests are major sinks of carbon, because it's a very rich recycling system which puts a lot of carbon into the soil, in addition to providing all the other ecosystem services and livelihoods, and providing and sequestering carbon in the biomass of the forest itself as well. Of course, and biodiversity and wildlife. Of course, you have also read about Amazon now becoming a net positive because of the logging and loss to biofuels development, and just the president now, Bolsonaro, becoming not a very environmental friendly guy overall. He's a fan of Trump, I suppose. I don't want to get political, but you know these things matter. So let's take this as good news that the tropical forest loss is not growing, has remained somewhat steady for a couple of decades now, and let's hope the protection continues. The other thing that's happening is that more and more corporations, especially the big ones like Facebook, Microsoft, Google, and Amazon, are becoming very vocal about their efforts to reduce their carbon footprint. So big tech companies likely to become carbon negative by 2030. That's a poll. Leading tech giants such as Microsoft, Apple, Apple, Amazon, Facebook, Google is not mentioned here, have come under increasing scrutiny for the last few years over their environmental footprint. Facebook says it has reached net zero emissions. There are reports saying that big tech's climate rhetoric is not matched by policy actions, so you have to be careful about claims by corporations as well. And of course, I will show an example later where Volkswagen, which is from Germany, very progressive country, got caught with cheating on emissions and paid a huge fine, may have caused some premature deaths in Eastern Europe as well because of the cheating on the emissions and so on. And emissions cut by 94% in 3 years, and companies aiming for net zero across its supply chain by 2030 is the Facebook's continued claim. Facebook, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, what do? They all gather data on everything you do, and they store everything, and we are also becoming addicted to storing all our messages, emails, photos, videos, and we are producing more and more and more of them. So the data centers also are massive energy guzzlers, so that also has to be looked at. The other unintended consequence of people wanting to make a lot of money out of this Bitcoin craze is that Bitcoin mining, which is large computations, is a monster when it comes to energy consumption. Right now, I think Bitcoin, generally cryptocurrency, ranks as high as many countries in its energy consumptions. So they are at par with countries like Norway in the amount of energy they consume, and it's expected to continue to increase. So there are efforts to make it greener. So this is the upper bound here, and the lower bound is in the yellow line here, and the estimate of what the Bitcoin business can do. But there are efforts to reduce its fossil fuel energy use and go towards green. So cryptocurrency goes green. Could proof of stake offer a solution to energy concerns? Bitcoin relies on many computers to crunch difficult math problems, but it doesn't have to. So there are not only energy consumed that is being reduced, but the computers and data transmission back and forth and so on can be maybe optimized to reduce energy consumption as well. Climate change itself is a very data intensive problem, especially if you think of monitoring the state of the planet. There is a black box set up somewhere in Australia now, which is supposed to record what's happening to the Earth system, just like a black box on an airplane that tells you when you crash what may have gone wrong. Hopefully you don't have to ever crash. But big data from satellites, from in situ measurements that we looked at before in chapter 2 and 3, from ice cores, from ocean sediments, tree rings, loess, whatever, all that can be used to find solutions and also make projections for the future, as well as early warning systems for health, water, energy, food, transportation, tourism industry, and shipping industry, aviation industry, and so on. And these early warning systems also require a lot of forecasting models, computers, and so on. So this is a photo of researchers posing for a group photo at the International Research Center of Big Data for Sustainable Development Goals in Beijing, China. The center was inaugurated to support the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. So there are 15 Sustainable Development Goals that address poverty, access to water, health, energy, and so on and so forth. And early warning systems are listed as one of the best adaptation tools. Remember, climate change is about adaptation and mitigation. Mitigation is where we are trying to reduce our impact by reducing emissions, deforestation, and other things. And adaptation is to adjust to things that are already changing, so manage the unavoidable versus avoid the unmanageable, kind of old saying. So big data is necessary, and yet big data centers which consume massive amounts of energy also have to go renewable, green, and so on and so forth. Okay, so again, let me leave this here at a shorter than normal podcast, just so that we will switch themes and go to see how intrinsic and extrinsic values are beginning to play out in terms of people getting involved. I already mentioned that the youth is protesting for climate action or against fossil fuels and so on. Elders are doing that. Corporations are going green. Everything kind of is sounding right. Policies have to match, actions have to match. There is a lot of criticism of the youth for standing up for climate change, saying they are living a good life, they are using smartphones, they are buying the latest phone, etc., etc., etc. I don't think there is a contradiction, because solutions have to come along which make phones carbon neutral, so that lay people and youth don't have to worry about how much carbon footprint there is, but just buy things because everything has become carbon neutral or net negative. So I will talk about the so-called carbon trap we are in later on under individual actions, but there is good news on all these fronts that we looked at. Okay.